A poor boy who was fixing things for a millionaire accidentally said something strange. A few days later, the millionaire took the boy to court and, "Eli, you done down there, or you waiting for Russ to eat that pipe?" There was a hole in the ceiling, a crooked crack, no longer than a finger, but always leaking something. Rain, dust, or silence. Eli sometimes stared at it longer than he realized, especially in the afternoons, when light slid through like someone spying in reverse. From the angle of the mattress on the attic floor, that patch of sky didn't feel like hope. It felt like something too far away to belong. Downstairs, the pipes coughed like old lungs. Greg's voice shot up the stairwell, hard and sharp. Not angry exactly, just indifferent in the way someone could be when they never meant kindness in the first place. Eli, crouched under the kitchen sink with grease-dark hands, didn't answer right away. He tightened the last joint with a wrench that had "Sears" scratched out on the handle. Water stopped dripping. That counted for something. He pulled himself out from the cabinet, wiped his palms on his jeans, and stood silently. Greg didn't thank him, just grunted and lit another cigarette by the screen door. Linda walked in with a plastic grocery bag, wearing her too bright smile. It had that shine people wore when they wanted to look like good people. The kind who said, "Bless your heart," and meant something else entirely. "Dinner's on the table," she called out, setting a bowl in front of Eli with a kind of mechanical tenderness. "Made it special tonight, bread and whatever canned thing we had left." She leaned down, voice sugary. "Aren't you lucky, sugar?" Her hand clapped too firmly on his back. Eli flinched, but said nothing. Across the table, Milo rolled his eyes. 14, sharper than he looked, and mean in that tired, hopeless way. He shoved his bowl aside with the back of his wrist. "Fix another stupid radio today," he said, sneering. "Gonna fix your face next." Greg flicked ash onto the floor. "Milo?" But it wasn't a warning. It was just a placeholder, like a traffic light that stayed red even when no cars came. Tess coughed from the living room, a wet, clinging sound. Eli left his untouched food and went to her. She was curled on the couch with a towel around her shoulders. Her cheeks burned red. Eli knelt beside her and gently laid a wet cloth on her forehead. "You're cold," Tess whispered, holding onto his sleeve. "No," Eli said. "You're just hot." He said it flatly, but his hand smoothed her hair with a kind of care no one had ever taught him. In this house, Eli never raised his voice. He didn't have the luxury. That night, while the rest slept, or pretended to, Eli lay on the attic floor, knees drawn to his chest. The ceiling's crack was still there, slicing the silence. A breeze slipped through the broken window and tickled the edge of a yellowed curtain. Somewhere downstairs, the fridge groaned, then settled. Mice scuttled in the wall behind him, or maybe rats. He reached for the radio he had fixed last week, an old wooden one with a chipped dial. It didn't get stations anymore, but it clicked on, and the hum comforted him. Static was better than silence. He whispered into the dark, not to be heard, but to release something. "If I used to have another name." He paused, like he might say more, then didn't. The days passed in routines built from resignation. Eli repaired what broke. He scrubbed the stovetop, the grout in the bathroom. Linda told people he was such a help around the house when social workers dropped by. Milo made sure Eli knew he was nothing but a chore boy. One afternoon, Milo kicked over Eli's radio again. "Stupid box. You think someone's going to care you fixed it?" Eli picked it up in silence. The dial was cracked now. He didn't speak, just walked out back and sat on the step. Greg watched him through the screen door. He said nothing, just smoked, then flicked the butt at Eli's feet. "You keep acting like a little mutt, you'll stay one." The words didn't land with weight. They just layered on top of all the others, becoming background noise. Eli still had grease under his fingernails and scratches on his knuckles. They healed slow. He slept next to a box of spare parts. Some nights, he dreamt of voices he didn't recognize, saying his name in a softer tone, one he had never heard in this house. One evening, as Eli walked home from the corner market, alone, carrying a gallon of milk for Linda, a man in a suit passed him. The man paused, glanced back at him once, then kept walking. Eli stopped too. Something pulled at the back of his neck, like a string that had been tied to him long ago. The man's face was strange, but not entirely unfamiliar. His eyes had something searching. But the moment passed. The man turned a corner. The sky turned grey. Eli kept walking. That night, when Linda slammed a plate down and Milo muttered something ugly under his breath, when Greg turned up the TV and Tess kept coughing in the next room, Eli didn't speak. He just watched the crack in the ceiling. And he whispered again, more softly this time. "If I used to have another name, why doesn't anyone say it anymore?" Dust moved like breath in the morning light, a faint shimmer rising from old floorboards. Outside, the wind had knocked down a bottle from the porch railing. It now rolled against the concrete in soft intervals, as if time had somewhere to be. Upstairs, Eli was not dreaming. He rarely did anymore. The attic was colder than usual. Something had shifted during the night. Air pressure, a coming storm, or perhaps nothing at all. He lay still beneath the threadbare blanket, one hand curled under his cheek, the other resting on his chest, where he'd once imagined a heartbeat might mean more than just survival. The door creaked open without a knock. Greg's heavy boots found the first step of the ladder. "You up?" Eli didn't move. It never mattered. A moment later, Greg tugged back the blanket with a grunt. "Get dressed. You're coming with." Eli sat up. "Where?" "Work. Real job this time." There wasn't any more conversation. Greg didn't waste words if he could avoid them. They left before breakfast, just past 7. The air outside was thin and cool, the kind that hinted at autumn, even though the calendar still insisted it was summer. Eli followed, without asking questions, his thin shoulders hunched slightly, hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket, a size too big, missing a zipper tooth. Greg's truck smelled like old cigarettes and fast food wrappers. The radio didn't work. Neither of them mentioned it. "Don't talk unless I say," Greg muttered, somewhere around the 6th red light. "We're just cleaning out some old place. Rich guy. Keep your eyes down." Eli nodded. It was a long drive, long enough for Eli to watch the trees change, from the skeletal kinds near their neighborhood to greener, more symmetrical rows near the estate. The houses grew quieter, lawns neater. Everything looked recently dusted, even the air. The mansion sat behind a rust-colored gate that opened silently when Greg pressed the intercom. The driveway curved like a spine, lined with trimmed hedges. The house itself was large, but not loud, not one of those screaming mansions that tried too hard. It was older, stately, the way some people aged with dignity. Inside, the silence was padded. Not empty, just careful. The kind of silence that had been cultivated. Eli stepped onto the stone floor. His sneakers squeaked slightly. A woman in a grey uniform and white gloves walked them through a hallway of framed oil paintings and high windows. "Mr. Whitmore is not to be disturbed," she said. Greg nodded gruffly without meeting her eyes. Eli looked up. Chandeliers, wooden beams, dust motes swimming in golden light. A staircase wide enough for 3 people to walk side by side without touching. The smell, leather, wood polish, something faintly floral, made him dizzy in a way he didn't understand. "This room," the woman said, pointing. It was a storage room of sorts, not messy, but full. Old furniture, antique cabinets, paintings wrapped in cloth. In one corner, a small table stood with a wooden music box on top. It looked lonely. "I tried it this morning," the woman added, "but it didn't play. It belonged to Mr. Whitmore's son. Please be careful." Greg shoved a mop bucket toward Eli. "You heard the lady." Eli stepped forward. His eyes had already locked on the box. It was about the size of a loaf of bread, carved from dark walnut, with inlays of lighter wood, shaped like ivy. A tiny brass handle on the side was dulled with age. He reached for it with hesitation, then stopped. A small breath escaped him. Not fear, not awe, something else. Memory? Eli wiped his hands on his jeans before touching it. Gently, he turned the key once, twice. It didn't click at first, then gave in with a slight snap. He adjusted the lid, let it open. No sound, just the interior. A small velvet lining, faded red, and a metal cylinder with raised dots, and the handle warm under his fingers. He whispered, almost absent-mindedly, "I remember this handle." The woman turned. "What did you say?" "I think I remember this. When I was 3. Greg paused, mop mid-air. Behind them, Maxwell Whitmore had stepped into the doorway. His coat was folded over his arm. He didn't speak. Something in his face shifted. Not shock, not anger. Recognition, maybe, or the ghost of it. Eli didn't look at anyone. He just sat still, hand still resting on the music box, as if it might begin to play if he waited long enough. No one spoke. Not for a while. Finally, the woman cleared her throat and stepped forward, murmuring something about tea and appointments. Greg placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. Time to go. But Maxwell still hadn't moved. As Eli stood, his hand brushed the edge of the box again, and the handle turned on its own. A mechanical twitch, reluctant but real. A faint note escaped. Just one. On the drive home, the truck was quieter than usual. Greg kept looking at Eli through the rearview mirror. Not long, just short glances. Like he was recalibrating something. Like he was trying to see a puzzle he didn't remember starting. Eli said nothing, but his hand kept drifting to his pocket, where he tucked a brass screw he found on the floor near the box. He didn't know why he kept it. He only knew it felt familiar. The fire had gone out, but the smell of it lingered. Not smoke, not anymore. Something older, quieter, like a memory of burning. Maxwell struck a match with deliberate slowness, shielding it from a draft with his palm. The tip flared, brief and bright, before he lowered it to the logs in the hearth. The flame took reluctantly, curling around the wood in lazy spirals. He sat back in the armchair without exhaling, as if the air inside him had nowhere better to be. Behind him, high on the oak-paneled wall, a portrait of a child watched the room with eyes slightly too large for his face. His smile was tentative, uncertain, the kind children wear when asked to hold still for too long. Elias. Maxwell turned slightly but didn't look back. He didn't need to. On the side table was a clear Ziploc pouch, the kind used for forensic evidence. Inside it, a plain glass tumbler, just half a fingerprint, and a dry smear near the rim. The last thing Eli had touched before leaving. A child works hard, but only asks for a glass of water, not candy or soft drink. Maxwell had slipped it into the pouch himself, carefully, with a hand that trembled more than he wanted to admit. When the envelope arrived 2 days later, he opened it alone in the kitchen. No music, no lights, just the hum of the refrigerator, the small click of the clock on the wall. 99.9%. He set the paper down. Then he didn't move for almost an hour. Not because he doubted it, but because something deeper than doubt, something older than grief, had started to surface. Later that night, He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Vincent Ray speaking. Still in the business? A pause. Not of recognition. Vincent remembered his voice immediately, but of wait. Depends who's asking. You already know who it is. Another pause. This one was longer. What do you want, Mr. Whitmore? I want you to finish something. They never let you finish. Vincent stepped into the drawing room the following afternoon, the same way he'd always entered houses like this, shoulders squared, eyes level, face unreadable. He didn't look like a detective from novels, no trench coat, no fedora, just a charcoal suit, a shirt without a tie, and a notebook tucked into the crook of his elbow. He wasn't young anymore, but his movements were clean, precise. Maxwell poured them both coffee without asking. Vincent let the silence linger, the way men used to before it became unfashionable. When he spoke, it was with the ease of someone who preferred not to repeat himself. Tell me why now. Maxwell slid the test result across the table. Vincent read it without blinking. You're sure it's him? Maxwell's voice was low, but not fragile. I was sure before the numbers came. Vincent tapped a finger on the edge of the page. You remember how this works? Once I start digging, I don't stop. If there's rot in the foundation... I'm counting on that, Maxwell cut in. Start with the fire. Vincent gave a short nod. You ever question the findings? Back then? I didn't question anything, Maxwell said. I was told the body was his. I buried the body. Vincent's expression didn't change, but his hand moved to the notebook. I remember that week, he said. No dental records, no DNA, too much damage. No one pushed for ID. It was grief, by default. Maxwell leaned back slightly. You tried to say something then. They shut me down, Vincent said simply. The file was closed in 7 days. That's faster than a parking ticket gets processed in this city. They both stared at the fire for a moment. The flames were higher now, licking at the edges of the log with soft crackles. Vincent broke the silence again. The boy mentioned anything? Any names? No, Maxwell said. But the way he touched that box... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Vincent scribbled something down, then flipped the page. There was a woman, he said. Martha Lang. Your son's nanny. She disappeared after the fire. Maxwell looked up sharply. No one ever found her. She never even made the witness list. Find her. Vincent nodded once. I will. That night, Maxwell didn't sleep. He returned to the library, where the fire had burned low again. He didn't light it this time. The silence felt thicker in the dark. He sat before the music box, still resting on its little table near the window. The curtains swayed gently. Outside, the trees moved like old thoughts. His fingers hovered over the box, then lowered. He touched the handle. It turned without resistance, a clean motion, like breath returning after shock. He lifted the lid. This time, it played. Not the full melody, just a loop, maybe 10 seconds long, but it was enough. Enough to take him back. He could see Elias, small hands spinning the crank, cheeks full of questions. Again, Papa. I just played it. But the ending didn't finish. He had laughed then, something warm and deep. You don't like stories with no endings? Elias had said, without looking up. Endings make me sad, but I still want them. Now, in the present, Maxwell closed the lid slowly. The last note lingered like a breath that didn't want to leave. He let it fade. Then, sitting there in the dark, alone, but not unheld, he let the tears fall. Not loud, not broken, just necessary. Some houses get quieter after retirement. Others simply surrender. The one on Willow Creek Lane sat back from the road like it was trying to forget it had once mattered. The yard was neither wild nor kept, just indecisive. Weeds hadn't fully taken over, but no flowers dared bloom. A rocking chair faced the street, though no one sat in it anymore. The blinds were drawn at midday. Vincent parked along the curb and took a long look at the structure before stepping out. He didn't knock right away. Instead, he paused to adjust his collar, then tapped twice. Firm, but unassuming. It was several seconds before the door opened a crack. Dr. Harris hadn't aged well. His hair, once thick and silver, had dulled into a yellowed grey, thinning at the sides. He wore a cardigan over a white undershirt, the kind people stopped noticing they were wearing once the years blurred together. "Vincent! Doctor!" Silence swelled in the gap. "I don't do statements," Harris said, beginning to close the door. Vincent didn't move. "I'm not here, for one. Not yet." Harris hesitated, then stepped aside with a sigh. "Coffee's stale. Hope that's all right." Inside, the house smelled faintly of old books and hand lotion. Medical journals gathered dust in uneven stacks. A photo of a younger Harris with his late wife sat crooked on the mantel. Vincent waited until the old man sat across from him. He didn't pull out the notebook right away. "You still have nightmares, Doctor?" Harris's eyes flicked up. "You always had a way of skipping the polite crap." "I never liked wasting time." The retired coroner rubbed his temples. "You think I don't carry it? That day's in my bones." "Then help me exorcise it," Vincent said quietly. Harris reached for his cup, sipped, winced. "Bitterness is a bitch, isn't it?" "Less than guilt," Vincent said. There was a pause. Not long, just long enough. "It wasn't my call," Harris said eventually. "I examined what was left. A child's body, unrecognizable, charred beyond anything decent. I told them it wasn't identifiable. That's what my report said. But," Vincent leaned forward, "Hugh came the next morning. Said the family didn't want this dragged out. Said the father was breaking. Said if I didn't mark it as conclusive, there'd be questions, protests, delays, lawyers." "And you signed it," Vincent said, not accusing, just finishing the sentence. "I signed it," Harris echoed, softer than a whisper. "Then I never looked back. Until now." Vincent opened his notebook. "I'll need that report." The original Harris stood slowly. His walk to the bookshelf was uneven, but not reluctant. He returned with a folder, thinner than Vincent expected. He handed it over. "One copy. The truth's a fragile thing. Keep it close." The Whitmore estate was quiet again by the time Vincent returned. He didn't go inside at first. He walked the garden path, past the hydrangeas, past the small stone bench where a child might have once paused to tie his shoes or chase a dragonfly. Inside, Maxwell sat by the fire again, reading without turning a page. "She kept something," Vincent said, standing just inside the doorway. Maxwell looked up. "Who?" "Mary." Mary had lived in the house long enough to forget she didn't own it. She'd dusted its banisters, stitched curtains, mourned in its silence. She had once braided Elias's hair when he asked, just once, and then never again, embarrassed by the softness. She had ironed Maxwell's shirts the day after his wife died. She had cleaned up the broken vase when he found out about the fire. Now, she stood in the linen closet, reaching for something behind the stack of old quilts. When she emerged, her hands shook. She didn't unwrap it right away. She held it like a fragile infant, swaddled in cloth. In the drawing room, she laid it gently on the ottoman. "I wasn't sure I should ever show you this," she said. Maxwell nodded, but didn't speak. She peeled back the cloth. The remnants of a child's sweater, singed at the sleeves, still smelling faintly of gasoline despite the years. The hem had melted in places, but one sleeve was intact and stitched inside a tag. "Whitmore," it read in tiny black letters. "I found it near the back fence, not in the nursery," Mary said. not where they said the body was. Vincent leaned closer. Why didn't you come forward? Her lips thinned. Because no one was listening, and I was just the help. Maxwell's eyes didn't leave the sweater. You believed he was alive? I still do, she said, then added more quietly. But not in the way I did before. Her hands stayed folded in her lap. Vincent watched her for a moment, then wrote something down. You'll testify, he asked. She nodded. I'll do more than that. I'll swear on my grave. After she left the room, Maxwell remained by the fire, staring at the burned fabric. Vincent didn't press him. Finally, Maxwell spoke. It's not the lies that haunt you. It's the moments when you almost asked the right question, and didn't. Vincent gave a small nod. We ask now. Maxwell's fingers brushed the singed wool. The truth never died, he murmured. People just got tired of digging. The Whitmore Foundation's executive floor always smelled faintly of steel and citrus oil. Too clean, too engineered. A place built for decisions, not reflection. It was Tuesday morning when Hugh Whitmore arrived, trailing 3 junior executives who didn't realize they were being used as a screen. Hugh didn't like walking into rooms alone anymore. Eyes always whispered more when they had company. We're scheduled to review the Denver acquisition at 10, one of the assistants said, flipping through a tablet. Mr. Whitmore, should I... Wait, Hugh said, holding up a hand. His eyes flicked toward the open office door. Inside, his brother's voice was unmistakable. Slower now than it used to be, but still firm. Vincent Ray's voice came next, crisp and matter-of-fact. They covered it up. Hugh stepped closer, motioning the assistants back silently. They paused, hovering near the doorway, caught between obedience and curiosity. Inside, Maxwell stood near the old walnut desk, a file open in his hands. Vincent sat across from him, pen poised. I have Harris's original report, Maxwell said, and Mary's statement. She found the sweater by the back fence, not the nursery. Gasoline burns, not from the fire. Vincent nodded slowly. That's enough to reopen the file. More than enough. Outside, Hugh's brow twitched. One of the employees, young, mid-20s, over-eager, leaned a little closer to the doorway, barely breathing. What about the boy? Vincent asked. Maxwell didn't hesitate. He touched that music box like he'd held it yesterday. He remembered the handle. Not a story. Muscle memory. That's not something you fake. Vincent leaned back. You ready to make it public? Maxwell closed the file with a soft snap. Not yet. I want to talk to him first. He deserves to hear it from me. One of the assistants shifted his weight. The floorboard creaked. Inside, both men went silent. Hugh stepped forward and knocked once, loud enough to be innocent. Maxwell, we have a meeting. A beat. Then Maxwell's voice, calm but unreadable. I'll be 5 minutes. The assistants stepped back, their expressions stiff, controlled, but the seed had been planted. By that evening, a post appeared on a blog known for corporate leaks. Whitmore, lost heir or convenient lie. The article was speculative, carefully worded, but included 2 specific details, the reopened file on the fire and the name Elias Whitmore. Within 24 hours, 3 other blogs reprinted it. A regional newspaper included it in their morning brief. By the end of the week, a radio host in upstate New York opened her segment with, "Rumors swirl this morning about one of the city's most mysterious disappearances. Is Elias Whitmore back from the dead? And if so, where's he been for the last 7 years?" Linda saw the story on her phone while microwaving dinner. The spoon in her hand clattered against the counter. She stood in the kitchen doorway, pale, and called to Greg, who was fixing the broken cabinet hinge. "Greg, it's out." "What's out?" She turned the screen toward him. He squinted, then read, then sat down. "I told you, we shouldn't have let him go with you that day," she said, her voice rising. "They must have seen him." Greg didn't respond. "We need to leave. If it gets out that we're raising them for welfare and forcing them to work underage, we'll go to jail." Still, nothing. "I said we need to go," Linda repeated, sharper this time. "Where?" "Anywhere," she snapped. "Out of state, somewhere with no connection to Whitmore. We'll say it's a vacation." Greg reached for his lighter. His hands shook slightly. "And if he won't go?" Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's a child. He doesn't get a vote." That night, they packed in silence. Linda folded shirts into a duffel bag with practiced hands. Greg stuffed cash into a worn envelope and taped it behind the glove box in the truck. They didn't talk about Eli. They just moved. What neither of them noticed was the figure in the hallway, barefoot, back pressed to the wall. Milo. He'd heard enough. The words were muffled, but the tone was not. The fear, the urgency, the phrase, "Take him before they come." He stood there a long time after they walked away. He didn't like Eli. Not really. But this was something else. Meanwhile, in the Whitmore estate, Maxwell read every article, one by one. Not with panic, with curiosity. He opened the oldest file in his possession, the Foundation Charter, signed by his great-grandfather, and placed it beside the latest blog headline. Then he stood and went to the library. The portrait of Elias still hung above the mantel, its colors softened by time. He lit a fire, not out of necessity, but habit. He didn't call Hugh. He didn't need to. Hugh came the next morning. He arrived without his assistance this time. They spoke in the study. "You know this is reckless," Hugh said. "This isn't about you or him. This is about all of us. Our name, our company, our people." Maxwell didn't flinch. "You mean your people? I mean the board, the press, the families with stakes in our future." Maxwell turned a page in the report. "Then let them watch." Hugh stepped closer, his voice low. "You're chasing a ghost." "No," Maxwell said. "You buried him. I'm just digging where you left off." Hugh scoffed. "Do you even know who that boy is? Maybe he believes it. Maybe he's been trained to believe it. But what if he's not Elias? What if this whole thing ruins everything?" Maxwell stood. His voice was softer than Hugh expected. "Then let it ruin everything that wasn't true." Hugh stared at him. "You're not well." Maxwell looked toward the window, where morning light spilled across the carpet. "I'm more awake than I've been in years." That evening, Eli sat on the attic floor, fixing the tuning dial of an old radio someone had thrown out. His fingers moved with quiet precision, but his ears were listening. He heard footsteps, he heard whispering, and then he heard something he didn't expect. Milo's voice. "Hey," the boy said, crouching at the attic hatch. "You need to careful. Tonight." Eli looked up, startled. "What?" "They're trying to send you away." Eli blinked. "Why would they?" "I don't know, but I heard them." Milo held out a crumpled granola bar and said, not unkindly, "We don't have time for questions. If you want to stay, you must listen to me." The storm had passed, but the wind hadn't let go. Out beyond the Whitmore estate, the trees bent softly toward the earth, their wet leaves catching the last of the dusk light. Inside, the house held its breath. Lamps glowed with muted amber, casting long, slow shadows across the library floor. Maxwell stood at the hearth, one hand on the mantel, the other wrapped loosely around a tumbler of untouched scotch. He hadn't spoken since Vincent walked in 20 minutes earlier, coat still damp from the rain. The detective didn't sit. He rarely did when the story wasn't finished. "She's dead," Vincent said at last. The words drifted across the room like smoke that didn't know where to settle. Maxwell didn't react. "Martha Lang," Vincent continued. "She overdosed. Quiet town 2 counties north. Alone. Rented under a fake name. Died in her sleep. That was 2 years ago." Maxwell's fingers tightened slightly on the mantel. "She'd been living under the radar," Vincent said. "Used aliases. Paid everything in cash. I wouldn't have found her if not for a hospice nurse who remembered a burned photo." He reached into his coat and handed over a sealed envelope. Maxwell opened it without sitting. Inside were photocopies, hospital records, a rental agreement, and the last thing, a letter. 8 pages, handwritten, shaky, personal. Vincent didn't narrate. He let the paper do it. Maxwell read. Her words were dry and cold. She wrote of a man, her husband, who'd been swallowed whole by debt, who lost everything after a deal turned. A deal she believed Maxwell engineered. The man had jumped off the Riverton Dam. She never forgave that. She planned her revenge not out of madness, but out of precision. Became a nanny, earned trust, studied the house. Then one night, when the family slept, she started a fire. Not to kill Elias, just to take him. She delivered him to a family she paid to keep quiet, told them he was a forgotten child, told Elias nothing, let him grow with the wrong name, the wrong story. And then she disappeared. Until now. Maxwell lowered the letter. His eyes didn't move. The silence expanded between them. "She didn't want money," Vincent said quietly. "Didn't want you to see her suffer. She just wanted you to live with it. To wake up every day wondering." Maxwell moved to the armchair. Saturday. Rubbed his hands together, slowly, like a man washing something off that wouldn't come clean. "I never even knew his name." "Her husband," he murmured. "She didn't expect you to," Vincent replied. Maxwell looked up. His voice cracked, just barely. "Did she ever say if he cried?" Vincent didn't answer. The fire burned low. Elsewhere, on the other side of town, the streetlights flickered yellow over wet asphalt. A bicycle rolled out from behind a fence, its tires hissing softly against the damp. Milo hunched low over the handlebars. He didn't wear a jacket. His hoodie clung to him, soaked through. But he kept pedaling. The thought repeated in his head like a drumbeat. He's not safe. He hadn't meant to overhear. But walls in their house were thin, and anger echoed. Greg's voice, sharp, Linda's, tight with panic. "If they find out what we've done, the train leaves in 3 days. We don't wait." Milo didn't like Eli. Not really. Not since that first day, when the quiet boy fixed the broken radio and made Greg smile. Milo had spent years trying to earn that smile. Eli got it without asking. But this wasn't about liking. This was about right. He skidded to a stop outside the Whitmore gates. The rain returned in slow droplets, brushing his face like cold fingertips. The intercom buzzed in his ear. "No visitors at this hour." He backed up, then started pounding. At first, no answer. Then, movement behind the door. Footsteps. Mary opened it, bathrobe wrapped tight, confusion sharpening into recognition. "Who?" "I need to talk to Mr. Whitmore," he gasped. "Now." "It's late. It's about Eli. I lived with him in Greg's house." She stepped aside. Inside, Maxwell and Vincent looked up when the door opened. Milo stood there, breath heaving, water dripping from his sleeves. "Sorry," he said between breaths, "but I heard them. Greg and Linda, they're taking him. By train. 3 days." Maxwell stood before Milo finished. Vincent grabbed his coat from the back of the chair. "Which station?" he asked. Central, Milo said. The side platforms. They said no one would see them. Maxwell turned to Mary, who'd stepped into the room quietly. Call the garage. Warm the car. Milo wiped his face with a sleeve. I didn't do it for him, he muttered. Maxwell didn't ask who him meant. He just nodded once. You did it anyway. The fire behind them crackled, but none of them looked back. The platform at Munro Station always looked like it had been forgotten on purpose. Rusted benches, cracked tile, and a payphone, with its receiver missing, dangled like a loose tooth on the far wall. An old vending machine blinked the same message over and over. Out of order. No announcements played, no voices carried, just wind, and the low hum of something waiting to happen. Greg stood beside a splintered bench, arms crossed, his face turned toward the horizon. Beside him, Eli sat with his knees pulled up onto the wooden slats, a backpack gripped tightly in his lap. His fingers kept twitching near the zipper, not opening it, just touching the worn canvas like it was a tether. You're like the ocean, Greg said. His voice was light, forced, like a song someone forgot the tune to halfway through. The air's different there, clean, no noise. Good for the lungs. Eli didn't reply. His shoes dangled above the concrete, not touching anything. His shoulders stayed hunched. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even frowning. Just still. Too still. The train was due in 17 minutes. Greg had checked twice, then stopped pretending not to check. We'll rent a place near the water, he added. Could teach you how to fish. You ever held a rod? Eli blinked slowly. He wasn't listening to the words, only the tone, only the way the breeze seemed to contradict everything Greg was trying to suggest. His mind kept drifting back to the music box, though it was miles away now. That melody had embedded itself deep. It played not in notes, but in memory, like muscle knowing what the heart forgot. Greg crouched in front of him. Look, I know it's been weird lately, but this trip is not a punishment, all right? Just a reset. People get too nosy sometimes. He offered a smile, brief and unconvincing. You'll have your own room this time. No attic. A new school, sure. But I'll talk to the counselor. Tell them you're a quiet one. We'll make it work. The boy's mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes never left the tracks. 12 minutes to arrival. A gull wheeled above, far from any water. It cried once, as if to mark the moment, then vanished into the overcast sky. Greg stood again, fidgeting with his collar. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket, tickets, printed and bent. One for him, one for Eli. They hadn't eaten. The wind picked up. And then, tires on gravel. Greg turned first, half expecting police, half hoping it was just a late passenger. What he saw instead was a sleek black car rolling to a stop near the edge of the platform. No screeching, just precision. The door opened, and Maxwell stepped out. He wasn't running, but he wasn't hesitating either. Behind him, Vincent climbed from the passenger side, eyes scanning, coat already flaring in the wind. His hand hovered near his inside pocket. Not threatening, just ready. Greg tensed. Vincent showed his badge, flipping it open with a flick. Greg Tanner's, step away from the boy. Greg laughed, too quickly. Come on, man. We're going on vacation. You think I'd run with him? Maxwell didn't respond. He looked at Eli instead, and Eli looked back. Something inside the boy snapped loose. He slid from the bench. His bag dropped. His feet moved before he knew what they were doing. A few steps, then a sprint. Then arms wrapped around Maxwell's waist so tightly the man had to stagger backward to catch his balance. Maxwell didn't say anything. He just folded his arms around Eli, one hand on the back of his head, the other firm against his shoulders. Eli buried his face into the coat, gripping fistfuls of fabric. His body shook, not with sobs, but something deeper. Relief, recognition. Maybe fear that even this wasn't real. Vincent stepped forward. "Greg Tanners," he said, voice now official, steady. "You are under arrest for child endangerment, attempted unlawful transport of a minor, and obstruction of investigation. You have the right to remain silent." Greg raised both hands slowly, eyebrows lifting. "Whoa, whoa, he's not mine, remember? You can't arrest a guy for taking his foster kid on a damn trip." "You didn't file travel clearance with Child Services," Vincent replied. "You didn't notify the agency. You packed cash and fake IDs. And we have witness testimony that you were fleeing the state under false pretenses." Greg's smile vanished. Officers from the second car stepped out, moving quietly but efficiently. One read from a warrant. The other stepped behind Greg, secured his hands, and led him away. Greg didn't resist. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He just watched Eli over his shoulder, as if trying to memorize something he never understood. Maxwell waited until the car door closed before kneeling. He met Eli's eyes. "You're all right now," he said. "You're safe." "I thought they'd make me leave again," Eli said, barely above a whisper. "You're not going anywhere," Maxwell said. "Not unless you want to. Not ever again." Eli blinked hard. "But I don't know what comes next." "You don't have to," Maxwell answered. "We'll find out together." He stood and reached for the backpack. It was heavier than it looked. He slung it over his shoulder, placed a gentle hand on the boy's back, and guided him toward the car. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. The platform was quiet again, the kind of silence that follows a storm and chooses not to explain itself. The train arrived 7 minutes late. No one boarded, no one left, just the wind. And the boy, who, for the first time in years, walked away from a station, not toward a destination, but toward something far better, a beginning. The courthouse didn't look like the kind of place where something as fragile as truth might live. It looked like it had been designed to hold stone, not stories. But that morning, as clouds rolled low above the city, a story that had long been silenced began to breathe again. Reporters hovered like gulls outside the marble steps, their breath fogging against cameras. "Is it true?" one whispered to another. "The Whitmore kid's alive?" No one answered. No one could. Not yet. Inside, in a private room just off the main hallway, Eli sat on a stiff-backed chair, legs swinging slightly above the floor. He didn't fidget. He just waited. His eyes were calm, but it was the kind of calm that came from exhaustion, not peace. Across from him, Maxwell sat holding a folder, his fingers tracing the edge of it, as if unsure whether it would cut or soothe. "I need to tell you something," Maxwell said, his voice lower than usual. "And I want it to come from me, not the lawyers, not the court." Eli watched him. He didn't nod. He didn't look away. "I'm not just someone who wants to help you," Maxwell said, his tone uneven now. "I'm not just an old man trying to fix a mistake. I'm your father." Eli blinked once. "No," he said quietly. Maxwell didn't move. "Yes." "You're—" "No, I would have known. I would have remembered." "They made sure you wouldn't," Maxwell said. "But I remember. I held you when you were born. I watched you fall asleep with your cheek pressed against my chest. I watched that vanish." Vincent stepped in, setting a sealed envelope between them. Inside, Martha Lang's confession, the original DNA match, photos, a burned sweater tag with the name Whitmore still legible. Eli opened the envelope, not with curiosity, but something closer to dread. He flipped through the pages, names, dates, the photo of a baby, round-cheeked, wide-eyed, gripping a tiny music box in both hands. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Then he let out a breath, and it turned into a cry. Not a scream, not anger, just a sound, like something broke free from his chest. He didn't ask more questions. Maxwell didn't offer more answers. There was nothing to debate anymore, only the ache of years between them. When Juliet knocked gently, saying, "It's time," neither moved at first. But then Eli stood, slowly. He wiped his face on his sleeve, adjusted the too large collar of his borrowed shirt, and walked out without another word. The courtroom was fuller than expected. Lawyers murmured to each other. Observers sat upright in wooden pews. The judge's bench a quiet shadow under the high windows. A soft clatter of keys, pages turning, heels across tile. Then silence. Eli walked in between Juliet and Maxwell. He didn't look left or right, just forward. The judge read the opening remarks. Then the testimonies began. Rachel, Martha's older sister, the one who had helped her get revenge, was the first to speak. Her voice was strained but precise. She described the knocking, the fire, the faceless coffin, and in the years that followed, she wondered how many lives she'd ruined. "I was thinking about my sister's pain," she said. "But I didn't think about the innocence of a child. I was complicit in the crime. I was the one who carried that boy to Greg. Next was Anya, the teacher. She brought copies of her complaint, dated 6 years ago. It had been dismissed. He came to school with bruises once," she said, "and I was told he fell wrong. I knew better. But I was told to let it go." The courtroom stayed quiet as she read the last line of her original report. "He is not safe in that house." Then came Dr. Harris. His cane clicked softly as he moved to the witness stand. His hand shook, but his voice didn't. "I signed a death certificate I didn't believe in," he said, "because I was told it would end the pain." He looked directly at Eli. "But it only delayed it." From the back of the room, Milo sat next to Mary. He leaned forward slightly when Eli turned his head and found him. Their eyes met only for a second, but it was enough. Greg didn't speak. His lawyer advised silence. Linda tried to, but when the music box was wound and played, its soft chime filling the chamber with something achingly pure, she broke. The sound pulled the years back too fast, too cruelly. Her sobs filled the space where denial had once lived. When all voices had spoken and the judge had reviewed the evidence, the final words came not from witnesses, but from the bench. "This case is not a trial of guilt," the judge said. "Not exactly. It is a reckoning. A boy disappeared, he was failed, and now what remains must be acknowledged." There was no celebration, no applause, just the sound of the gavel, the scratching of pens, and a brief, nearly whispered sentence. "The court recognizes Elias Whitmore as alive, unlawfully displaced, and restored to custody of his biological parent." Eli didn't react. He looked at the wood grain of the table, the way it swirled like smoke. Then he felt it. A hand, larger than his, warmer than most, slip into his. Maxwell's. He squeezed, and Eli squeezed back. It was the smallest smile, but it meant something. Because for the first time, Eli wasn't leaving through a back door, or being told to pack, or to be quiet. This time, he stood and walked towards something. Not an ending, but a name, a truth, and a place to begin again. The Whitmore estate had 27 windows in the east wing alone. Eli had counted them on his second night, lying awake in the oversized bed, the silence too clean to trust. The glass panes were spotless, but he still caught himself reaching for metal bars in the dark, as if his hands expected them to be there. Nothing locked, no creak of chains in the night, just wide-open hallways, soft lights, and the kind of quiet that didn't ask questions. Maxwell didn't hover. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't knock unless he had to. When Eli said he didn't want help with brushing his teeth, Maxwell stepped back. When he said he didn't like oatmeal, it disappeared from the breakfast table the next morning. There were staff, but they moved like ghosts, polite, present, invisible. And Mary, who made his tea the way Tess used to, strong and sweet, with just enough lemon. But Tess wasn't here. That first week, Eli woke 3 times in a row and called for her. The 4th time, he didn't bother. He just lay there, eyes fixed on the chandelier above, blinking slowly, rhythmically, like a lighthouse searching a shore that never came. Then, on a rainy Thursday, Milo showed up. Mary found him on the front step, soaked to the bone, with one shoelace missing and a plastic bag clutched in his hand. "He says he's here to return something," she told Maxwell. "He's not hurt?" Maxwell asked. "Not yet," she replied, arching an eyebrow. Maxwell stepped aside. "Let him in." The boy didn't hesitate, just walked straight through the door and into the main hall like he had always belonged there, then froze when he saw Eli at the top of the staircase. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I brought your radio," Milo said finally, lifting the bag. "The one from the attic. You left it." Eli descended the stairs, one hand trailing the banister, like he wasn't sure the marble was real. "You carried it all the way here?" "It still works," Milo added quickly. "Mostly. I didn't take anything." Eli stared at him. "You hated me." "Not really," Milo said. "I think I just hated that you made me notice things I was trying not to." The radio was heavier than Eli remembered. He took it with both hands, looked down at the knobs. Dust in the crevices. The crack in the speaker still there. "I heard what you did," Eli said. "At the station." Milo shrugged. "Didn't do it for you." "I know," Eli said. "That's why it mattered." The silence between them shifted. And when Eli looked up again, he smiled. "Do you want tea?" Milo blinked. "Like real tea, not sink water with sugar." "We have lemon," Eli said. That afternoon, they sat by the wide living room window, 2 boys watching the rain blur the hedges outside. They didn't talk about Greg, or Linda, or Court. They just argued over which radio station had the better songs. And when Milo stood to leave, Eli didn't let him. He handed him a spare toothbrush, a hoodie, and a bedroll for the guest room. "You're not a guest," he said. "You're my brother now." Milo didn't argue. That night, Maxwell stood in the doorway of Eli's room. He didn't step in. Just watched the boy sit at his desk, sketching in the margins of a book with a dull pencil. "You don't have to call me anything," he said. Eli didn't look up. "I know." Maxwell nodded. "Just whatever feels right. Or nothing at all." There was a pause. Then Eli said, without looking over, "Okay." Later that week, Eli dreamed. Not of fire, not of shouting, but of a girl in a red jacket. Leela. She stood at the end of a long hallway, her braids bouncing as she smiled, waving him over. "You can go now," she said softly. "I'll watch the door." Eli reached for her hand, but before their fingers touched, she dissolved into light, quiet, kind, and gone. He woke with tears dried into his hair, but not afraid. At breakfast, Maxwell asked, "Do you want the name Elias?" Eli stirred his cereal, then answered slowly, "Eli is who I became. Elias is who I was." Maxwell placed his hand over Eli's gently. "Then both are yours, and neither are lost." Eli didn't reply, but that afternoon, he walked into Maxwell's office, where the fireplace hadn't been lit yet, and said, "I want to start a foundation." Maxwell looked up. "For what?" "For kids like Tess, and Milo, and the ones still out there." Maxwell sat back. "You don't want toys, or a party." "I want them to matter," Eli said, "because I didn't, not for a long time. There was no ceremony, no ribbon. But a week later, a trust was filed under the name the Lila Project, named not for legacy, but for memory. That night, Eli fell asleep beside the window. The curtains were open, no bars, and for the first time in years, his sleep came easy. Because now, finally, he had a future worth waking up to. There were days when the past felt farther than it truly was. On others, it lived right under the skin. Spring came late that year, the kind that didn't announce itself with blossoms, but crept into window panes and under cuffs. The Whitmore estate stirred more than bloomed. Quiet renovations, softer linens, warmer lamps. In one of the old guest rooms, Tess sat cross-legged on the floor, turning over a puzzle piece in her palm. She didn't talk much, not yet, but her eyes had stopped scanning for exits. That was enough for now. Milo had taken to teaching the younger children, kids like Tess, like himself, once, how to rewire old radios and fix cracked screens. They worked out of the old stables, now converted into a workshop with rows of tables, coffee tins filled with screws, and a whiteboard scrawled with the words, "There's no such thing as broken." Just paused. It was Eli who'd written that, not as a motto, just a thought he couldn't get out of his head. The foundation took form quickly, faster than most said it should. Maxwell handled the structure, the lawyers, the approvals. Eli insisted on the name, Lila's Light, not just because of her, because of what she did in the end, stand in the dark so someone else could leave it. Juliet came by often now, not in suits, not with briefcases. She brought books sometimes, journals, stories she thought Eli might like. They'd sit on the back patio, he with a sketch pad, she with her coffee, and talk about strange things, time, loss, the things that should have disappeared but didn't. "Do you ever think about what would have happened," Eli asked once, "if I never left that house?" Juliet had paused, watching a breeze ripple through the lemon tree near the steps. "I think about who you became instead," she said, "and I don't wish it on anyone, but I wouldn't take it from you either." That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He found himself standing in front of the mirror in the hallway, staring, not at himself, but at the frame. It was ornate, old, chipped at the corners. Maxwell said it had come with the house. It reflected him in full, not tall, not broad, just steady, steadier than before. In the reflection, he caught movement. Maxwell, walking past behind him, pausing. "You all right?" the man asked. Eli nodded, then added after a pause, "She liked music, you know. Lila. She used to sing under her breath when she was scared. Not real songs, just sounds." Maxwell didn't say anything. Eli smiled, faintly. "We used to pretend that the cracks in the wall were rivers, that if we followed them long enough, they'd take us home." Maxwell stepped beside him. They did. The fundraising concert was Juliet's idea. Abe, the pianist who'd once taught Maxwell's late wife, agreed to play. He didn't ask for payment, just the chance to contribute. The hall was filled beyond expectation, press, donors, former foster families, old friends of the Whitmore name. But most of all, children, kids in donated clothes, kids who never clapped too loud, kids who kept one eye on the exits just in case. The lights dimmed. The piano gleamed under the amber overheads. Abe sat, cracked his knuckles, and began to play. At first, it was unfamiliar, a quiet, trembling melody that wandered up and down like someone pacing in thought. But then the notes shifted. The room changed. The melody was unmistakable now. The music box song. People didn't whisper. They didn't shift. They just listened, breath held. Near the end of the piece, Abe paused. One measure, then two. Eli stood. He walked to the stage slowly, one hand brushing the velvet curtain. He didn't ask, didn't announce. He sat beside the old man, who nodded once and moved aside. Eli placed his hand on the lower keys. His left hand, the one that used to tremble. The one he'd trained to hold screwdrivers and turn gears when the world wouldn't offer more, and he played. The final bars of the song rang out. Not loud, not showy, but clear. Finished. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. No one clapped. They stood. All of them. The spotlight found him, not harsh, not white, but gold, like sunlight through glass, like morning on a day when no one had to run. It caught his cheekbones, his brow, his shoulders. And in that light, Eli's face didn't look small or scared. It looked full. It looked whole. It looked named. Lila's light became more than a foundation. It became a place, a path, a promise. Some children stayed for months. Others came back years later just to say thank you. Some never spoke of what they'd left behind. They didn't have to. Milo taught. Tess began painting. Juliet came less often, but always called. Maxwell built a new wing with more windows, none with bars. And Eli, he lived. Sometimes he still dreamed of fire, but now it always ended the same way, with a girl in a red jacket holding out her hand saying, "You're safe, go." He never asked why he'd survived. He just made sure others would too. And on the wall in the entryway, framed above the light switch, hung a small, melted piece of metal, the crank from a music box. Still, after all that time, silent, but no longer broken. Some children grow up silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because no one has ever listened. Lila's light is not just a name, but the spark of a simple belief that every person, no matter how forgotten, deserves a place to start over. Eli's story is not about finding a name, but about a journey through loss, deception, and ultimately forgiveness. It is a journey of imperfect people, from a remorseful father to a once doubting boy, to a once cold friend who finally stands up for what is right. What about you? Have you ever thought you were too small to be noticed, or seen someone like Eli and looked away? What do you think would happen if the world started to care before it was too late? We can't change what's past, but we can always choose to move on, like Eli did, in the light, not of victory, but of faith regained. It is a pleasure to know that you listened to our story until the last seconds. Are your eyes tired? Find a warm towel and put it on your eyes, then go to sleep. See you on the next videos.